time I have spoken to either a Chamber of Commerce or a Board of Trade since I became leader of the Common Sense Conservatives 2 years ago. During that time, I have spoken at 110 shop floors and 5 union local facilities. And the reason why this is only my first chamber or board of trade is nothing to do with my view on business. I love business. I love free enterprise. I love the people who risk their entire worth their entire family savings in order to start a business and build their dreams. Rather, the reason this is my first time speaking to a business association of this type is because my experience with the corporate lobbyists in Ottawa, the main groups there, have been that they have been utterly useless in advancing any common sense interests for the people on the ground. The corporate lobbyists in Ottawa are focused on getting lunches with ministers at the Rideau Club or showing off their latest ESG brochure, or expecting that politicians are going to do things for them without actually convincing the people on the ground of the benefit to them. My common sense plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime is a bottom-up free enterprise agenda, not a top-down state capitalism agenda. It is not about politicians and CEOs working together for their own interests. It is about unleashing the power of free enterprise so that workers and entrepreneurs and consumers can exchange the voluntary purchase of goods for services, goods for dollars, of investment for interest, and of work for wages. It is about putting people back in charge of their lives. And my message to corporate Canada is that when I'm Prime Minister, if you want any of your policy agenda pushed forward, you're going to have to convince not just me, but the people of Canada that it is good for them. For too long, corporate leaders have thought that their role is simply to write a policy statement and expect it to be implemented. Meanwhile, it has been left to workers on the ground and First Nations in their communities to fight for the projects that have been good for them, projects that are ultimately blocked by government gatekeepers and leaving those workers and those communities on the sidelines. And so when I'm Prime Minister, my obsession, my daily obsession, will be about what is good for the working class people of this country. And I'm going to go through my common sense plan now and talk about why this plan is not only popular, the one obviously very popular with the people. We've seen the results of we've obviously seen the public opinion data showing that people overwhelmingly support my common sense plan, but why this plan is necessary to turn our economy around. Let's start with the state of play in Canada. After 8 years of Justin Trudeau and the NDP, everything costs more. Food prices have risen faster than at any time in 40 years. This is because of a carbon tax that has increased the cost for the farmers who produce the food, the truckers who ship the food, the grocers who sell the food. A carbon tax that is scheduled to quadruple over the next 5.5 years and which will go up on April 1st. Now, the NDP in this province has agreed to implement that tax, where in other provinces the local government has said no, and therefore Trudeau has imposed it from above. Here, the NDP has enthusiastically embraced the goal of raising energy prices on working-class families and has committed to go ahead with the hike this coming April 1st, a 23% carbon tax hike that will make life more expensive for everyday Canadians who are already unable to eat. This is happening in the context of 2 million annual visits, 2 million annual visits to food banks, a massive 32% increase over 8 years ago. And there are now a third of charities in Canada that are actually turning people away from food banks because they do not have enough food for them. So now we have a new phenomenon in Canada. It's a Facebook network with 8,000 members called the Dumpster Diving Network. This is a group of Canadians who share tips on how you can eat out of a garbage can in Canada. You only have to take a drive around communities across this country to see the tent cities that pop up. This existed in the downtown east side of Vancouver for some time, but the model of downtown east side has been spread right across the country. And, for example, on the other side of the nation, in Halifax, they have 30 homeless encampments. This is exactly the worst time to raise the cost of food. And that is why I am announcing today that I'm calling on NDP Premier David Eby and Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh to cancel the April 1st carbon tax hike, spike the hike, and axe the tax. This is a tax that, by the way, targets small businesses. One reason I chose this association to speak to is because you represent a lot of small businesses, entrepreneurial, bottom-up enterprises. BC actually has good associations for business. You guys represent the entrepreneurial sector, unlike some of their other corporate centers where they're focused on representing large protected corporations. You have entrepreneurial bottom-up businesses who are getting hit exceptionally hard. There has been no rebate for the carbon tax for small businesses. In fact, in BC, there's no rebate for anyone. But small businesses are going to pay this tax without having any compensation. And of course, they often, Trudeau will say, pass it on to consumers. Well, in some cases, you can't, because you're up against foreign competitors who don't pay the carbon tax. In other words, this tax is forcing our businesses to send their money and their jobs to other countries from whom we will import those things back to Canada. Let me give you a very simple example of this. Suntech Tomatoes in Manotick, in south of Ottawa, they grow tomatoes, as the name would suggest. They have greenhouses, and Trudeau charges the carbon tax on the CO2 they release into the greenhouse, even though that CO2 is absorbed by the plant life. Apparently, he missed that day in science class. It doesn't even go into the atmosphere. So the consequence of this is the government sends a price signal to Manotick customers to buy Mexican tomatoes, which have to be shipped right across North America, burning fossil fuels on trucks and trains. So the consumer buys the more polluting foreign tomato at the disadvantage of the greener and cleaner Canadian tomato. We are sending our jobs and our money to other more polluting countries in the process. In fact, the solution to fight climate change is to do precisely the opposite, to bring it home to our clean and our environmentally responsible industries in this country. Let me give you an example of how we can do that. Natural gas. We have 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas beneath our feet. We have clean hydroelectricity, cold weather, which allows us to liquefy it with 25% less energy than is used in the United States of America, because after all, converting gas into a liquid is a process of cooling it down. And what do we have in Canada? Our most abundant natural resource is cold weather. That you don't know anything about that in British Columbia, so no complaining for many of you. But you have no idea how cold it gets in Ottawa. In fact, last winter it was so cold, Justin Trudeau was seen with his hands in his own pockets. But think about the incredible opportunity we have here. So, LNG Canada, approved by the previous Harper Conservative government, with the wise counsel of the great ministers Ed Fast, Carrie Lynn Finlay, and James Moore, who all championed the project for British Columbia. It came as a result of Ellis Ross, who was the chief of the HESLA at the time, and a future Conservative member of Parliament for Northern British Columbia. $40 billion, the biggest project in Canadian history of any kind, public or private.